Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the South-Afrifur Podcast. You're listening to myself, Ivik Wolf here. To this evening, we actually have a very, very interesting podcast set up for you guys. We have two very, very cool guests. One of them is from Germany, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And the other one is one of our very own South African furries here. We've been doing a bit of a South African-esque stint for a while. So we can actually get a whole bunch of everybody to sort of get involved and everything like that. One of the things that we sort of enjoy about this is obviously, Furry.fm is based in Switzerland, but vastly German speaking, maybe. I'm going to get, I'll get thrown over the coals for this later. But we also have KiDra, who you did hear speak just now, and Jess. We'll get into that just now. And our... What would I call you? Honorable at this point. Scratch, who is always here, never fleeting, never fading away.
I am the furniture.
You are the furniture. You're the coat rack.
I prefer to think of myself as an Ottoman.
Oh, okay, an Ottoman.
I sexually identify as an Ottoman.
All right. But yeah, so this evening we're going to be taking a look. Yes, that works. Taking a look at retro gaming through the years, the influence in respect to sort of how it evolved within the furry scene and things like that, how some people were influenced into many of their other sort of things. Beyond that, sort of just retro gaming in general. So yeah, I think we're going to have one hell of an interesting podcast with everybody here. Already, Halcyon is saying hello. Apparently, cousin Jess, KiDra, guys, Scratch, and Ivik. Yay, hello. We can say hello to him. If you guys want to check the chat, it's on furry.fm. I actually sent that to you. You should be able to just open up the tab on your right-hand side.
I need to sign in as a guest.
Yes, you can sign in as a guest, or you can sign in with an actual account. Great. Okay, cool. So first off, while Jess is signing in, yeah, okay, cool. Sorry. All right. So maybe just tell us a little bit about yourselves and the experiences that you guys have had in retro gaming, and obviously for your side, KiDra, just a whole bunch of other things that you can also talk about. So.
Yeah, let's start with Jess.
Yes, start with Jess then.
Yeah, basically, I've been part of the fandom since I was about 12 years old. It started off as just looking for werewolf pictures and eventually coming over and seeing furry art websites and noticing that they had IRC chat and joining up there and basically hanging out most of the evenings and chatting away until late at night, making friends and that sort of stuff. But I've been a gamer long before that. My first little foray in gaming was on a 80 computer, which I played Outrun on, and we had one at home, and it was absolutely fantastic. Later on, I got a NES and a whole bunch of other things, and what I love is there's so many areas of my gaming and the furry fandom that actually cross over, and we can chat about that a bit later. So that's my backstory. Yeah.
And KiDra, your side?
Yeah, I've been on the fandom now for almost 10 years. I grew up with video games in the 80s and 90s, and the first games I came in contact with were an old Pong console and an Atari 2600.
Ooh.
Then later on, I got my very own Sega Master System, which was awesome for the time back then. And my first computer was an Amiga 500. So gaming has been part of my life all life and continues to be a big part of my life. But because my childhood was full of old video games, they are a nice anchor to re-experience, get back into the feeling of what it was like to be a child and relive those old memories. That's what I like to do sometimes. And yeah.
Okay. Question for both of you. And Scratch and I will probably also answer this as well. Most influential game that you guys have found?
Well, influential. there's two types of influential. There's influential as an art form, and then there's influential for me as a person. And I think for me as a person, the most influential game that I ever played was Doom. The first Doom that came out. Before that we had Wolfenstein, and the graphics was a bit blocky, and it was the first game that you actually saw a giant leap in graphical fidelity, where it actually felt like you were in the game and you were playing with it. But not only that, when they made that game, they made sure that the engine was so elegant and easy that you can mod it. And I've literally been playing that game to this day, just changing up on mods and altering it, getting new stages, weapons, enemies, that sort of stuff. So for me personally, it's Doom, but I think for the industry as a whole, that could be debatable. And I would say that every 2 to 3 years back then, there was a game that came out that completely changed the industry. I mean, Commander King, and then you had Doom from Commander King, that you can just imagine those gaps and those leaps in technology. So, but for me personally, Doom.
Okay, and KiDra?
Well, that's a hard one for me. I mean, influential in regard to myself, maybe Zillion on the Sega Master System, because my grandfather helped me playing that game. It was a game where you had to enter an underground base that was a labyrinth, and in each room you had to find codes. And the codes were numbers mirrored, so one looked like an M, the two looked like a heart. As a kid, I didn't get that yet, so I noted them down. My grandfather helped me, and the Master System, I was actually very proud when I made progress in a game. I mean, was in my single-digit years back then, so that I like to show my grandfather and my family when I made progress, so that they're proud of me. So I guess I would call this the most influential on me among other games, but the industry. Maybe Wing Commander. Because, I mean, the Wing Commander games always try to push the limits of the systems. Don't know how well they did there, but they set the stage for space simulators, flight simulators, besides the X-Wing games back then.
Oh.
Wing Commander had furries. The main enemy of the game was this cat race. So that was like lions and tigers and things. And what I remember about that game the most is how great it was animated.
Yeah, the Karafi.
I
mean, Wing Commander 3 was that game that raised the bar in regards to graphics fidelity on the PC. But I played those games on Amiga back then, so that was the most that this old computer can do. Like Wing Commander 1 and X-Wing was on PC that I played then years later.
Yeah, and what's interesting, if you want to play Wing Commander 3 today on a real computer without using emulation, you have to track down a 386. Anything faster than that, the game actually runs too fast, and you get frame skipping and audio issues. Which it's very interesting, and one of the reasons I love collecting old computers is just to play those on the real thing.
Scratch?
Yeah, so on that topic, I'll get to my top 10 list, whatever, shortly. On that topic, video games have an interesting problem in that sort of keeping them as pieces of art, keeping them as historical sort of records is difficult because of the technology that keeps moving around. Old games have their servers, old multiplayer games have their servers shut off. Even older games, like you said, Wing Commander, have technical limitations that make it impossible for you to play these games in their original form without emulation or something like that. So sort of being a video game historian, if there is such a job description, is difficult.
Yeah.
It's the one medium where you have the problem that it's difficult to preserve it.
Well, it's a huge problem, and I consider myself a retro gamer, but I also mainly focus on the hardware. So It's worth pointing out I run a little YouTube channel that just focuses on repairing and keeping the old hardware alive and things. And you're dead right. Getting the hardware to work is extremely difficult. And I've spent personally to get a piece of hardware to work 2 or 3 years tracking down a specific floppy drive to get this thing to work. But there are legislations in America that allows museums to actually archive games, and you're allowed to play the games via emulation at the museum. So if you have internet access, Archive.org is a good example of a museum that's doing exactly that. But instead of having it played at the museum, they actually have an online emulator that you can use. So a lot of these games that we're going to mention tonight, you can actually play them on Archive.org legally. And they've got a law that's there just for the sole purpose of preserving old video games, which is amazing.
That is really cool. I did not know that.
It has limitations, though. You mentioned multiplayer online games. It doesn't cover that. So that's
understandably, yeah.
That's so sad for me, because when an online server shuts down for an RPG that you loved, it's gone forever. And I really wish that would bring out a law stating if they do shut down a server, they either need to release the source code or release the game in a fashion that you can run local servers still on there, because you paid for this product and it's disappeared.
Yeah, it's like what happened with RuneScape now recently, as well as the old WoW servers.
Yeah, precisely, and it also happened with Mist Uru is another good example, and that one actually got revitalized. The company just said, okay, we're shutting this down, everything, here's the source code, go nuts. And there's a dedicated community that took the source code, improved it, fixed all of the bugs for Windows 10, and there's a server online today that you can play the game for free because of that. So there are solutions to this.
Think about all those games that use GameSpy as an online service.
There's tens of games. You mentioned GameSpy that still can't be played today because GameSpy was shut down. The multiplayer service is gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the removal of GameSpy kind of almost tanked a large amount of the gaming community for a small amount of time, I think. I still remember GameSpy back in the day when I had, what was it? Red Alert. I think was also a GameSpy game, if I remember. Red Alert, the first one.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on Westwood.
Oh yeah.
Pour one out. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually curious now if Warhammer 40k Dawn of War, the first, if it still would work, or if they change anything.
Warhammer 40k?
The first Dawn of War RTS.
Oh, yeah.
They support local servers, though, so I don't think that's much of an issue.
Yeah, but that's the interesting one is the licenses on that game. It's one of the things, the reasons why GOG took so long to actually get the Warhammer games was because it's licensed in two different parts. You've got the licensee for the game itself, and then the licensee for Warhammer, the actual board game. And both of those sort of need to be paid and agree to release the game on a platform. That's why so many games you can't get it on GOG and Steam anymore, because you might have the license for the game, but you don't have the license for the soundtrack, or the license for the game, no one knows who owns it, so it becomes an issue.
Yeah, that is an issue. Shit.
But yeah, I think it's something that it's not focus on the negative, let's focus on the positive and move on.
Oh yeah, no, fair enough.
Yeah, sure.
So, I mean, obviously, this being a furry radio station and everything like that, what were the games that influenced you most towards, say, that sort of motion?
Dragon Lore 2, The Heart of the Dragon Man, Sam and Max Hit the Road.
Yay!
Let's see. What else? I will get back to that. I'm sure we'll find more.
Yeah, for me, without a doubt, the biggest influence a PC game was Jazz Jackrabbit 1 and 2 in the furry community. And
that was a good game.
Fantastic game. It's also one of those Epic Mega Games made it, and what's interesting is the people that made that game, a lot of the team went on and they made Unreal Tournament. You won't believe it, but they actually did. And there was also Croc 1 and 2 that I played endlessly. It was this little crocodile platform, and this was before I knew that the PlayStation Crash Bandicoot and that was out. Interesting story behind Croc is when they showed Croc, it was supposed to be a game for Nintendo, and Nintendo for the N64 immediately didn't approve the project, but they copied the idea for Mario 64 almost to the T of what Croc was, but they fixed the controls. So it's one of those sad cases in gaming. But a fantastic game nonetheless that really tied into the furriness and stuff.
All right. Scratch?
Mm-hmm. In games that sort of resonated in the furry sense.
Yeah.
I wonder, did I actually play a lot of that kind of stuff?
You had Sonic.
Yeah, I had Sonic, and that was fun for a while. Yeah, like I think that was like the only one that's really specifically anthropomorphic that I played a lot when I was younger.
No, go.
No, I'm trying to think. That's the thing.
So I know for me it was what's the word? It was Quest for Glory. I think it was 3 and 4, oddly enough, because Quest for Glory 3 had to do with like a whole bunch of lion people, and Quest for Glory 4, you were in a village somewhere in the middle of what could only be considered Transylvania, with a whole bunch of werewolves and vampires.
Yeah, that was a fantastic game, and it's interesting. I wonder if anyone played any of the NES Disney games. We had like Darkwing Duck, Tiny Toons, DuckTales.
Oh, I played both of those. All three of those.
And all of them were great. It was actually made by Konami.
Yeah.
And what I loved about the DuckTales, for instance, is that they made it easy enough so anyone can grab the game and play. While Konami's other platformers, it's so hard you just couldn't get into it.
Since you mentioned it, now I have DuckTales on Game Boy.
Oh, so you had a DuckTales on Game Boy. How was the Game Boy port?
Well, I don't have any comparison, but it was a good game, definitely. It was fun.
Yeah,
and it's interesting that through my childhood, and we probably had this in Germany as well, the Disney series, we had it here every Sunday at 1 o'clock for an hour. We had like the Disney sort of special that either Darkwing Duck or DuckTales, and they rotated it through, and that's a phenomenon I think went through the world, and did the furry side later on. I think that kind of created a lot of furries. Kind of what Zootopia has done now. That was the Zootopia.
How about Pink Panther?
Oh yes, of course, Pink Panther. Even the rebooted Pink Panther was good.
Yeah, and Tom and Jerry, the originals.
Tom and Jerry, yeah. The originals are far better than the new ones. The new ones don't grab me at all.
No, they had like 3 different shows running, like Tom and Jerry Kids. After that, which was good, it was still good, but nothing beats the original. Was good. Yeah. There
was obviously a lot less talking in the new ones, in the old ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what's interesting is how that actually also, once again, that shaped the fandom. I can remember just when I joined, it was still riding on the coattails of Tiny Toons, Tom and Jerry. What was that skunk again? I can't remember the name of it, but Pepe Le Pew.
Pepe Le Pew.
Pepe Le Pew, yeah.
That was a furry icon for a very long time.
That was risque though. Risque as well. But I mean, that's also where Sabrina came from. The artist who drew Sabrina and Maxine, was it?
Yeah, and
Sabrina. It was Eric Schwartz.
Yeah, it was Eric Schwartz.
Yes, Eric W. Schwartz. Yes, that one.
Yeah, and if you ever have some time, just YouTube Eric Schwartz animation that he did on his Amiga, because basically a lot of people don't know this, but the Sabrina story is more or less based on his life from the perspective of his eventual wife. So he also did a lot of animations and things on the Amiga, and the whole comic strip was that was my furry life for like 3 or 4 years. I focused on that so much. Then again, the risque side of his artwork I didn't touch back then.
Well, I have to say one game that definitely made a lot of furries and what went past me that's on a bucket list is the point-and-click adventure Inherit the Earth. Do you remember?
I do not know that.
Yeah,
no.
Inherit the South-Afrifur is a point-and-click adventure following a fox, and it's basically it has the classic fox trope that foxes are untrustworthy and stealing things, and there's this orb that controls the weather in the town, and that goes missing. So of course, who stole the orb? It has to be the fox. So you have to like play the game and try to show that you're not the person that stole it. But what's nice about that is even if you don't like the game, even if you never the game, there's a comic strip that continues the storyline, and that went on for like several years. I think it's still going on now. So if you have some time, just like pick that up. That is absolutely fantastic.
Interesting.
Okay. All right. Sure. Just so you guys are aware, we are aware of the small technical difficulty. We are busy fixing that. One of the things that I do possibly also want to just speak about, maybe just enlighten us a little bit more in respect to what the retro gaming scene is like. What exactly happens there? I know that you've mentioned that there's a lot of people who do this stuff pretty much on their ace. They do it on their own to look at all of these aspects of gaming and things like that. But I mean, like, how exactly do we get from point A to point B?
Well, the retro scene is, once again, I like drawing parallels, so I'm going to say it's a lot like what the furries are. So you've got a lot of people very passionate about old consoles and nostalgia and what they felt like playing the games back then. And what they're doing is, they're trying to keep these consoles alive, because there's a lot of problems with things like capacitors, leaking batteries, DVD-ROMs that break. So you get a lot of very technical people that know how to fix these systems. And they keep on bringing out new innovations for it. Like, for instance, the DVD-ROMs on there. If your DVD-ROM fails, you can probably still pick one up somewhere, but they're quite expensive. And by now, if you do pick one up, it's already like 8 or 9 years old, so it'll probably break quite quickly. So there are people that's busy trying to keep it alive by building replacements for these DVD-ROMs that work on SD cards and modern technology, so you can still play your games on these old computers.
Well, I remember that with certain arcade cabinets, the challenge is that the game is stored on a ROM that has a battery, and as soon as the ROM loses power, the game is gone. So how do you remove the ROM chip from the board to try to preserve the game?
That's a difficult question.
It was a challenge for some people. I mean, you need to open up the chip at times or whatever. I don't know how they actually did it, but
you're talking about the arcade systems.
Yeah, I think it was a Sega Arcade system where they had this issue that if the battery of the ROM was empty or you disconnected it, the game was gone.
Yeah, it had a suicide battery. I can actually elaborate on that, but it's a bit technical. I don't know. It's good. I think some people might enjoy listening to how they did it. So there's one of two ways that you can do it. So originally when MAME came out and they needed these ROM dumps to use MAME, what they would do is they'll actually get a live board that somehow the battery didn't die in 12 years that it's been in existence, and they'll plug the program on top of it and then dump the thing before the actual battery runs out. So that's the first way that you get that to work. The second way is that it's not actually all of the code for the game, it's just the encryption key that gets destroyed. The second way is far more difficult, but you can literally go and brute force and then reverse engineer the code to make the system work again, or get a reversed copy of what the encryption looks like, unencrypted, and you can make it work from there. And it's a fantastic article. I'm not going to go too in depth. People, if you have Hackaday, if you have internet, go to Hackaday and just type in arcade preservation. You'll find the article, and it's a good 2-hour read on how they actually did it, and fascinating stuff. But I won't bore everyone with that.
Well, I mean, when I dipped my toes into retro gaming, I mean, the first time I got my hands on an Amiga emulator, it was amazing. It was a whole day where I was a child again, just reliving those old games, and I even recognized the game by the sound the floppy drive made while loading them. I mean, the Amiga floppy drives were incredibly loud. It was part of the...
Oh, yeah. They definitely were loud. Those like old floppy drives, like clacking motorized things.
Yeah, but that was awesome. I mean, you could recognize them by the loading sequence. And when I later tried out different emulators, I first ran into the issue of input lag. Like with the old systems, you had a CRT, the consoles were much more simple, so you had basically instant reaction to your button presses. Now, when you emulate a system, you're trying to emulate basically a real-time system with a not real-time system on an entirely different piece of hardware, and everything adds input lag, like the TFT, or if you're playing on TV, and you did not set your TV into game mode, it has post-processing and will add even more lag. USB adds lag. If you use Bluetooth, it adds lag.
Huh.
Yeah, it's especially if you're doing like all platformers where it's frame accurate and you have to jump at exactly specific times. All of that little lag, that 4 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds you get here and there, it actually destroys the game itself. A very good example of this is Punch Out on the NES. There's on the final boss, you literally have 2 frames that you have to hit a punch on. If you don't hit it in those 2 frames, then the guy can block and you can't finish the game. And with that 20 millisecond lag, that's 2 frames, so you instantly lose the opportunity to do it.
No, I didn't know the window was that small. Like, I knew the final boss in Punch Out was ridiculous, but I didn't know it was that frame perfect that it needed to be.
It's in 2
You
frames,
noticed
but
you,
you
like-
can look at the audience, and then there's one guy with a flash, and if you see him and you press immediately after, it's more or less in that gap. So there is a grace period, but if there's a delay, both of those are out of sync, and you'll miss the punch.
And I mean, when I tried a Game Boy emulator, I could compare it directly because I still have my 80s original gray old Game Boy here, and it works. And for example, the game Balloon Kid. On a Game Boy, it's instant. On an emulator, you notice the lag. And we will never get away from the lag again because of the systems we use with all the conversion and the type of screens that we use. If you want an original experience, you need a CRT.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why we love old systems. Sorry.
Old bubble TVs that if you hit them hard enough, they explode.
Well, I still have 2 in my collection that I use for old systems. 2 RGB professional studio monitors, CRTs.
I mean, seriously, if you play these old games on a perfect TFT or LCD screen, they look bad. You need the distortion and unsharp image of a CRT. And so most emulators, you can apply shader filters that restore this old look, including geometric distortion.
And what's interesting about that is a lot of the furry games, especially the way that the tails are rendered and the little dots around that, the fur doesn't look right on an LCD screen, versus a CRT where it has scan lines and it divides those pixels up nicely. The fur looks fine. And I think you have a game called Snow Wolfie, which is a very good example of that, where it's one of the few games where on a platformer, they actually took the time to animate the tail swinging around left to right as you're playing the game. So it's like very real, very pleasing to play that game.
Yeah.
On the Nintendo Switch, there are also games on the eStore as a series of that's called the Arcade Archive. And they're selling old games like Neo Geo games, the original Super Mario Brothers VS version, the arcade version. And I think even they don't get it 100% right in regard to input lag, but they're playable.
And I mean that's probably part of the entire thing is it playable after you've ported it and everything like that. I know that maybe I'm not necessarily sure whether I'll have people on my rear about this, but I know that I used to actually port a couple of games over to the computer because I don't have the consoles, I don't have the sort of money to be able to play them. But I mean, like PS1 games, for instance, or anything to do with. I was a big fan of Spyro, especially the older versions of it. And there's no other way to play Spyro but to sort of find the emulators and get that going, because otherwise you're going to have to try to find somebody who has, the older Spyro or like the older systems that could play it, and also then get that. It eventually it becomes a collector's item, and then from there on out, like you can't necessarily enjoy the game as much.
You know what, Ivek? They're re-releasing the original Spyro trilogy.
Yes, which makes it worse because now I can't play it anymore.
Well, Spyro, I think, is a bit of a bad example, but Spyro, what's nice about the PlayStation 1, if you had a PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 still plays PlayStation 1 games, PlayStation 3 still plays PlayStation 1, and PS4, I think does, I haven't tried it yet, but it still does PS1. And you mentioned that Spyro as a collector's item, you're right. If you go get a sealed copy of Spyro today from eBay, because you have to import it, you're not going to get a sealed copy in South Africa anymore because of all of our piracy here. Most of the people, when they had a PS1, had a pirated copy of it. So if you want the original, you go to eBay, you pay for the collector's, for the sealed premium for it, and it's a good 400 to 500 rand for Spyro the Dragon, Spyro 1.
So, yeah, and I mean, that's not including import costs.
Yeah, and it doesn't include the 2 months it takes to get here for shipping, and also the fact that there's a good chance it'll get here and get stolen. I've had quite a few of my games stolen that way as well. But this brings up an interesting topic of conversation, which is ROMs and emulators, and I think I might elaborate a bit on my stance for that, and elaborate a bit for our international viewers on how South Africa was for video games. So, if you guys don't mind,
it was tough.
Sure.
It was tough, man.
It was. We never had officially. Sega did do distribution here through PhotoCats, but Nintendo didn't. So NES, Super NES, N64, they started bringing that in with Reggie's, but that was after apartheid ended. So back in the day, if you wanted to play NES, you would have gotten what was known as a TV game, which was a family clone from China, and all of the copied and ROM games, and it was sold through Reggie's. And Reggie's, for those international viewers that don't know the name, it's actually Toys R Us. It's the same company. And they were selling these by the hundreds of thousands. So if you ever talk to a South African and you say TV games, it's the NES, they'll tell you that you used to play Darkwing Duck or Tiny Toons or DuckTales.
Or Contra or Super Mario or any of the Mario games.
Super Mario, all of those. But probably not Zelda because that had a save ROM. It wasn't out on the Fabric clone. But nonetheless, all of those that they used to play on there, and it was all copies and counterfeits. So, in terms of ROMs and internet and piracy and that, the way I see it locally is if you're an individual and you're not selling things and you're just downloading to play the game, you're not hurting anyone. The stuff was never sold here. So I personally don't mind it if someone else played ROMs during the day and things. But let's say that you can buy these games today. I would prefer it if people actually bought them and support the companies.
Yeah. Unless it's EA.
Unless it's...
Sorry. EA.
Well, Electronic Arts was a decent company in the 90s, and they just went...
Keyword was.
Then they became a bloated company that decides to sell everything at like half built.
They were in the 90s. They were already doing that whole thing of they would buy a computer gaming company, strip it of all of its assets, and then release one game and then move on to something else. That was already their name in the 90s. They started off just designing video picture editing software. That's where the name came from, Electronic Arts. Yeah. That's how they acquired all of these gaming companies. But if there's one company that can go away, I agree with you, it's Electronic Arts. We need to bring Bullfrog back and Theme Hospital and all of these amazing IPs that anyone could actually go and if they shut down, buy them and release sequels for us, please.
Just on that topic, the proper spiritual successor to Theme Hospital, called 2 Points Hospital, is being released end of August, I believe. It's like it feels from the look of it, it looks almost like the feel is very much in line with Theme Hospital. Also, like with regards to EA essentially sort of cannibalizing all kinds of good studios and like dragging their name through the mud, like Westwood, Maxis, Bullfrog, Pandemic, the list goes on. And like most recently, I believe even BioWare. Like even a company that big doesn't seem to be like EA is.
East or something.
regardless, BioWare being bought up by EA was not necessarily a good idea because, I mean,
No.
yeah, the thing is, EA as
Why
a
Mass
company,
Effect?
sort of fine, but like they have horrible business practices, and that's the big issue.
Please let me get started on Command & Conquer. What on earth did they do with Command & Conquer? Turning it into a tower defense mobile.
I know.
I want to cry.
When did they do that? I don't even know about it.
Oh.
Like the newest Command & Conquer thing is a mobile release. That's all you need to know.
And it's like tower defense. It's automated tower defense. It's not even the full thing. It's terrible.
It's this weird zone control nonsense thing.
I mean, there was at one point that when they brought out, what was it, Command and Conquer? What was it? Was during the time that they decided to make an FPS version of it.
Oh, Renegade.
Yeah, Renegade was interesting.
Well, Renegade is an interesting story. Basically, they wanted to compete because they heard Blizzard was doing an FPS called StarCraft Ghost, I think it was, and this never got released. It wasn't developed
never saw the light of day,
forever. It was like rumored to come out on the original Xbox, but they never released it. But nonetheless, they needed to beat Blizzard with it, and unfortunately, they rushed the game to such an extent it was.
Yeah.
It still has a following today. You can get a modern remake; it works, but it just wasn't that good. I think KiDra, you've got some fond memories with some FPSs, if I remember correctly, with Dune and that stuff.
Oh yes, definitely. The first Dune game from 1992, which was by Cryo. Cryo is the same company that made Dragon Lord 2. They could tell stories. I give him that. And the first Dune was a great mix of adventure, part RTS. I would say this was one of the games that I played on and off all the time. Then in 2000, the first Deus Ex. That was amazing.
The first Deus Ex was ridiculous.
Yeah, or the first Unreal.
Yeah, both of those games I have fond memories of. I mean, the 2000s was just the best time for video gaming ever. The first 3 years, so many great games. Half-Life 2, Deus Ex, you had quite a few. Unreal Tournament came out in 2000. UT 2003 came out in 2002. UT 1 came out in 1999. It was just a phenomenal time to be alive for FPS and gaming, especially PC gaming and stuff. But there's some furry games that came out back then as well. Just want to go through my list.
I have to say, I'm actually glad that a few of the great games from back then are being re-released, like the Monkey Island games.
Oh, yes, Monkey Island was good.
Released. Another World.
Another World was
Fandango.
Fantastic game.
Oh, yeah.
Dark Souls difficult, but fantastic game. But then again, most of the games back then were like Dark Souls difficulty. And we didn't complain. We finished them.
I do want to ask, speaking about like furry styled games, who still plays Cadia? Who's still on there?
Oh man, I don't do the Cadia thing. I do the Second Life thing, but that's a thing that we can discuss. But Cadia, I tried it 8 or 9 times back when I had dial-up, and it worked. You could move, you could click your mouse, and then you can like go and make a cup of coffee and come back, and it'll be to the next screen already, so that you can go to the next screen.
Yeah.
But later on I revisited it, and it became a very nice sort of chat platform to hang out with friends and stuff, and I really enjoyed that. And then that, of course, I replaced with Second Life, which is what I'm currently using for my chat platform, online, social experience sort of thing.
Yeah. So now that Cadia was one of my sort of, I remember, Scratch, I'm not sure if you ever remember, but because the high school had the only reliable internet that I could find, I had at one point ported Cadia to the library computer because I had to spend a little bit of time after school there before sports and things like that, because I was one of the librarians, and I put Cadia on there. The Muck was on there, for instance, as well. Nobody actually knew that I was doing that. But yeah, so I would spend large amounts of time. In fact, like I would go to school at 5 o'clock in the morning, 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. I know that what was it? the librarian would come in, not the librarian, but the person who ran the computer labs would come in at around about 5:45, sometimes 6:30, 6:45. Sorry, what am I talking about? And I would have to, I would wait outside her door and then go inside and go onto the muck and things like that, because at that point there was I think it was on Owlhaven, which is a place where people read poetry and things like that I would be able to go to, and I would post my own poetry there. And so, I mean, that was my experience back then. Beyond that, I'd be like on Cadia trying to do things, and our internet was just so slow. It was terrifyingly bad.
One thing I do have to say in defense of Arcade, even with the slow internet, you can still use the chat functionality and stuff.
Yeah.
I can remember the biggest problem I had was this mod or expansion to it that was like this feral island that you could go into, and it'll actually mod your characters into ferals, and you could hang out and chat and stuff. It was awesome. But that one, if you got into the island, it was a good like 20-30 minutes for me to load the game. But once you were in, you could sort of move around. It was slow, and you could still chat and things. And I had a lot of good experiences with that. And this wasn't on 56K, of course. This was on a 128K ISDN modem back then. So yeah, that was expensive stuff, but it worked, and the game was playable for 128K. So KiDra, I know you like the virtual reality stuff. Any sort of social free or virtual reality games that you think will be quite nice socially?
Socially, I only know that there's a VR chat, but I don't use it, so not yet. There are general games that are social, like Sports Bar VR. So you can play a round of pool with your friends or play darts, but it's a pool simulator, basically. And in general, a few multiplayer games, like if you want to be on a submarine, you can play Iron Wolf VR.
Sounds nice.
But nothing comes to my mind that would be specifically furry-related and multiplayer right now.
Yeah, well, what I'm really disappointed in is that Second Life was going to be available on VR, and they stopped the development for that. I can just imagine with all of the development tools and things. So for those of you listening that haven't played Second Life is like VR Chat. It existed long before VR Chat, but you can mod and change everything in the game. So it comes with a set of building tools. You can create buildings, personas, scripts for games. You can, at one stage, Intel recreated a computer museum in the game. And I can just imagine that sort of game with VR would be perfect for furries, because it still has quite a large following. There's still like tens of thousands of furries on Second Life playing their personas and interacting and role-playing and things. So that with VR would have been like the ultimate experience. Especially for furries.
It surprises me that they didn't do that, because there is no specific furry content for multiplayer right now, because we have FaceBreak, where you can have like your persona, or in general an avatar, animated to match your face, so the other person sees that avatar and not your real face. It sounds like it would be the natural next step in evolution of furry interaction.
I definitely think so. And I think that if anyone can actually come to the table, and even if it starts off very janky, because there's an open engine that Second Life actually uses, an open version of it, that's open source, so anyone can grab it. If a furry that's listening out there looking for a 2-year-long project really wants to do something like that, I think you'll have a lot of support from the community. I would definitely get behind it. I actually think that VR Chat is based on that source code. I wouldn't be surprised. Don't quote me on that. But
I just got a message from Scratch saying that...
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, I am back. Yes,
Hello.
my apologies. Okay. Yeah, we seem to be reconnected. Apologies for that, ladies and gentlemen. Just my internet was a little bit wonky just now.
Yeah. Okay,
we're back. Okay. We left... I can't remember where we left off.
Well, I think you should get some good milk bones to treat your router a bit later, so it can behave a bit better. Make sure your internet is quite nice.
Yeah, spray it down with water. Bad router.
No.
Yeah,
Then
best
it'll just
idea.
act out and it'll go worse. You need to treat it.
Yes.
How a bit of random trivia in the meantime.
Okay. So, did you say Ren and Stimpy?
random trivia, but Ren Stimpy is awesome too.
Oh, because like that's I don't know. Like weirdly enough, if we want to go all the way back to the for a couple of seconds. Now I know that Ren and Stimpy actually recently got a reboot, or not recently, but like there was something that they did when it went on to like adult. What's that?
Adult Swim?
Yes, Adult Swim, where they literally almost turned the entire thing into just nothing but like pornography, practically like pornography for adults, but not necessarily as bad. But
Innuendo, like super innuendo laden.
it was. I think one of the most iconic pictures is literally Ren with a saw, Stimpy with a log on his back, and sawing,
Oh boy.
where the saw is literally just connected to.
Sawing with pelvic thrusts. Let's just call
Sawing
it
with pelvic thrust. That's pretty much what it became. And for some reason, like I still remember, because we had the SNES, there was a Ren and Stimpy game.
There was?
Yes, there was a Ren and Stimpy SNES game. It was horrifyingly scary, and it was weirdly difficult for its like time and everything like that. But I mean, I don't know, like it was oddly satisfying to play it.
So
But
yeah, you had two different types of kids back then. The ones with cable TV and the ones without. So you either had the kids that loved Ren and Stimpy because they had cable at home, or you had people like me who loved Freakazoid because that was the only thing that was on TV that was almost sort of similar to that. And it's funny you should mention the game. Freakazoid also had a game, but it was also extremely hard to play. My word.
I mean,
what was
some
it?
of the old games were that hard, not because of design, of the level design or intended, but because the controls were so bad.
Yeah.
It always felt like you were walking around on ice.
I mean, I heard that nowadays, when you have platformer, they need to include a mechanic that when you are already over the ledge of a platform and you jump, the jump still counts. So, and that's called coyote time. From Wild Coyote.
Yeah, and it's interesting you should mention that. I was playing, in terms of game design, I'm replaying The Lion King at the moment. I was playing the SNES version, and my word, that game is brutal. And I figured out why. The actual hitboxes on that game. So today, in modern times, if you design a platform or a game, you make sure that the hitbox is basically inside of the character, and it's like a sliver of the character. So when you touch the character accidentally, or you come a bit close to an arm or an appendix, it doesn't actually trigger, so you don't lose a life or you don't get hit. But in The Lion King, they used to draw the actual hitbox around the characters. So even if you get in the vicinity, you're hovering above a hyena, for instance, you get hit. And,
yes, I had that happen. Yeah,
and that game
very often.
4 times, 4 hits on a full health bar, and you're down for the count.
Yeah,
that game is epically difficult, especially the Buffalo level. Oh,
it was not that hard.
I finished it as a kid. I can't as an adult anymore.
It was really. I mean, like, what was it? Granted, look, I mean, if I have to think about it. If I spent about 2 or 3 hours a day playing Lion King, it took me, I think, if I'm not mistaken, with, again, 2 or 3 hours a day, probably around about 2 weeks to finally finish it. And the worst thing is that, like, with the SNES, you turn it off, you don't save.
Yeah,
there was
that's
no
the
save
problem.
option for that one. I know that there were save options from, I mean, we also had, what was it, the first Super Mario Brothers, which did have a save function.
RTC.
Yeah, but you had to just sit down and play and memorize everything. It was the same thing with the other game that I had.
But here's the thing, that Lion King is only like 30 minutes long. So from the start of the game to the end of the game is 30 minutes. So if you were playing it as a kid for 2 hours a week for 3 weeks, that's why you could finish it, because you actually got good at the game to finish it. And I like challenge anyone, just pick it up and try it today. It's not easy. You're going to have to do the same thing, spend 2 hours a week for 3 weeks to actually finish it, or use save states. I mean, the miracle of emulation, you can actually save the game at any time.
Have you ever played the original Mega Man games from NES?
Yeah, it's a lot like that.
Yeah.
Recently,
Mega
by
Man
myself,
was so
the
difficult. Oh,
Mega Man Legacy Collection on Switch, and God, they're hard. I mean, I'm actually using the rewind feature because I assume it's also the input lag playing into that, and the level design is unfair.
Yeah, and that also has the whole thing where you have to fight the bosses in a certain order, but it doesn't tell you what the order is.
I played Mega Man 1, 2, and 3 on my Game Boy, and I had a lot of fun with it as a kid, so that's why I picked this up again. I wanted to see the NES versions, and we've come such a long way in video game design.
Oh, yes.
Definitely. And the Game Boy had screen blur, so every time you jump, the screen just looks like a big smear. It's amazing what we put up as kids growing up. But you know what? That's nostalgia. When I play a Game Boy, even though the screen is terrible, I still feel nostalgic and love for the system because that's what I grew up on.
True.
And we can love imperfect things, I guess, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You were mentioning like hitboxes and Coyote Time a while ago. There was this big, not controversy, I suppose, but this big issue with regards to the remastered Crash Bandicoot games, where people say that some levels are borderline impossible given the current design of the game, because they would, make the colliders for Crash was a capsule shape with the rounded edges on the top and the bottom, whereas the old Crash had a square hitbox. So ledges would be incredibly difficult for people to sort of traverse properly because they'd essentially start sliding off the ledge before they had before they properly had a chance to sort of time their jump.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that being a problem. I can remember reading up on the game analysis for it, and you're right, it was because of the hitboxes and the shape. Because what they did is they took the mechanics from Crash Bandicoot 3 and applied it to 2 and 1, while 2 and 1 had their own mechanics as well on top of that. And it just wasn't all compatible.
Well, I have to say, one remake done right is Wonderboy: The Dragon's Trap. That's a Master System game from 1989, and they remade it, keeping the original levels, the original mechanics, but adding new sound effects or remade sound effects and beautiful hand-drawn graphics over it, but you can switch back to the original. And I can imagine that that's also a game furries would like, because the character, the Wonderboy, can also choose a Wonder Girl in this version, has been cursed by a dragon and turns into a dragon. So now he wants to get his human form back. Some would maybe ask why, this is better. But on your journey, you get transformed into Birdman, Fishman, Mouseman, Lionman, and as you get new abilities, you can reach new parts of the levels. But this I would recommend for people to actually play, because this is an old level design. When you're Birdman, you fly up in the sky, suddenly there's a door in the middle of the sky, and you're what is this doing here? But this was old game design. I finished it. It's a great game. A lot of fun still.
It's a very sort of not simple game, but it's a very accessible game, I believe. And from what I've seen in the trailer, it doesn't seem to be incredibly unforgiving or taxing. But
Correct.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. Like the art of it on it is amazing. I did see the trailer for it.
And you even had a save function back then, like when you go in a hut where you can save, you are shown a code that you type in if you want to continue.
Yeah. At least it was that. Continuing code. Because you had to switch it off at some point because Mom is getting angry.
And what an interesting concept to try and explain to kids today, or modern gamers, is that back in the day, if you wanted to save, you had to get to a certain part of the stage and write down a 14-digit code that you would type in to get back to where you were. Most likely, your items don't carry over. You'll just start the game at that point.
That reminds me, wasn't there a Japanese guy who had his Super Nintendo hooked up to power and turned on for over 20 years because he didn't want to lose his JRPG save?
Yo.
Wouldn't surprise me. Talking about that sort of thing is, in Japan, they had a satellite broadcast system. And you get a special cartridge for your Super Nintendo. And also later on there was one for Mega Drive in Europe, but basically in Japan it was for the SNES. So you'll stick that in, and then once a week it'll download a game and you can actually play it. And these games, to this day, a lot of them haven't been dumped. So because if you want to play them today, you have to find someone that had one of these cartridges, that had it plugged in for that week to update that game to download it, and then never switch that cartridge on again to update it to a new game.
Sure.
To make matters worse is all of the games are like mini games, so it's a segment of a game. So it's the first 3 stages of a Zelda that no one has ever played. And I find it fascinating that a lot of them we've recovered, that people actually found cartridges, that people didn't switch on again afterwards and update to new games. It's just amazing to me that to this day, in terms of restoring history and keeping these games alive, that there's people out there that's willing to go the extra mile to track these down and dump them. I just find it fascinating. And speaking of which, if you guys can recommend any games to our viewers, let's say top 3, what would you recommend? Or to the viewers, not my viewers. Your viewers, I think.
my viewers. Huh.
Well,
top 3 retro games.
Any. It
I
could
would
be retro
definitely-
or modern. Or furry or non-furry. Just if it's furry games, it gets bonus points. I've got my little point book here. I'll make a note of it.
Oh, so we're playing a game now, is that right?
Oh,
Jeez.
well,
Recommendations would definitely be, oddly enough, I mean, granted, it was my first Game Boy game, but I would definitely suggest something like Zelda Link's Awakening. It's weird. Like, if I remember I went down Nostalgia Road about 2 weeks ago and listened to what was it? The one song from there. I can't remember what it is now. Damn it! But yeah, it was the one song from there, and I actually spent the vast majority of around about 10 minutes just crying my eyes out. Oh, the Ballad of the Wind song.
oh,
No?
that's a fantastic
The Windfish. The Windfish. Absolutely amazing. Because the thing is that it pops through every now and again in the game itself, like reminding you that this is exactly what you're trying to do. And I still remember that the basic premise of that game, and I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who does want to play like Zelda Link's Awakening, but the basic premise of that game is possibly one of the most like sort of scary things on earth. It's the entire idea of it's literally kind of, what do you call it? A dream within a dream. What's that movie called again? Inception. Yeah, it's very Inception-esque because it's literally a dream within a dream, and the thing that you're attempting to do is get back home, but getting back home is a completely different thing. Second game, oh, jeez, the original Red Alert. Honestly, I spent hours playing Turtle Defense, like against the PC, just waiting until it like runs out of resources and I run out of put an engineer into their barracks, and then just take over their base.
Of course, you'd be the guy who does that.
Yes.
Did you ever take your engineers and stick them into a personnel carrier and then use the teleportation power? Well, no, it wasn't a power up; it was a super weapon, and then teleport that into the enemy's base and just start taking over random buildings.
I didn't even use the APC. I would just destroy all of their bottom defense, go in from there, find their barracks, and then take over their war factory as well, and let the computer slowly panic itself to death.
And I think that still is one of the most iconic songs ever in a video game. It's the
Yeah.
Hell March. If that
The Hell March
plays,
from
you just get that vision of an army marching towards you, causing almost an apocalypse in the result. It's an iconic game with an iconic soundtrack.
What would be the third one? I'm not sure. Scratch, you want to go?
Okay. I would highly recommend Grim Fandango as an old school point and click, but most of LucasArts games from point and click games from back then including Salmon Max Hit the Road, Day of the Tentacle, Monkey Island. That whole series is still really good, holds up really well. For sort of how out of left field it came, I know it's more recent, but for me, when Portal first landed, Portal 1,
Oh yeah,
that was just like eye-opening. It's just how they managed to sort of mess around with space and your ability to move in it. That was like, I honestly enjoyed that game far more than I should have. It's a fantastic game. GLaDOS is like a super recognizable, very iconic character.
One of the best enemies ever was GLaDOS.
Yeah.
Say. That's and the System Shock 2's AI was also fantastic.
Oh yeah, System Shock. Badge gave me a recommendation for Populous.
Populous. Peter Molyneux.
Yeah, 1989.
Interesting fun fact with that one. Do you know why the characters, you had to move them by basically putting mountains and changing the terrain to make them go other directions? Your Populous?
I think I know this, but I don't know the exact wording of it.
Peter
Go ahead.
You didn't know how to code to move the characters left or right, so you had to change the environment, and you had a piece of code that will make them, if they can't move forward, go left or go right. So you didn't know how to change the control scheme, so that's why that was implemented, and that's one of the key mechanics in the game.
Is that how Lemmings was created?
No,
Lemmings.
Lemmings is a whole different story, but I can't go into depth because I'll spend 2 hours talking about Lemmings.
Here's another sort of retro game piece of trivia that I love bringing up at parties because I'm that guy. In the original Civilization, Sid Meier's Civilizations 1, Gandhi is, as a world leader, Gandhi is obviously very peaceful. Yeah, the Gandhi bug, I know.
Yeah.
Gandhi is a super peaceful character, but he has the predisposition in like all the Civilization games. I believe they kept it in. He has the predisposition of becoming incredibly warlike late game. For like historically, like in context, for no good reason. However, in Civilizations 1, when the game was first programmed, Gandhi had a very low sort of propensity for war, which was stored in an integer value, and I think it was like that. The value of it was like 1. And then later in the game, when a civilization adopts democracy, I believe, as a social policy or as a ruling style,
points.
Yeah, you get like -2 or -5 or whatever to that status, to that warlike status, but whatever propensity for war. Now, because Gandhi was already so low, you subtract 5 from 1, so you get -4. But integer values couldn't be stored in negatives, so it would overflow back to the maximum value of the integer -4. So you have this character who goes from incredibly peaceful, and as soon as he adopts democracy, he becomes an absolute tyrant.
Yeah, he goes new camp.
Because of an integer overflow. I find that hilarious.
So, KiDra, if you had to choose 3 games?
Yeah, the aforementioned Wonderboy the Dragon's Trap.
Yeah.
It's available, it's very playable, and you can get the original feeling by switching back to original sound and original graphics. You won't be able to stand it for a long time, but it's nice to look into that, because when the dragon spits fire, it's this high-pitched sound that the Master System made, which you can't bear nowadays anymore. Then Overload, because Overload is the spiritual successor of the original Descent made by the original team. And this was the game that defined the 6 Degrees of Freedom genre. It plays great. Weapon handling is a lot of fun. You have the original maze-style underground mines with robots that have a great AI. They're totally assholes like they were in the original. And Scratch, I have to agree to you, the old Sierra or LucasArts point-and-click adventures. But there I would point out Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis.
Yes.
Fantastic.
There, at some point, that game asks you what type of player you are. If you want more action, if you want to have harder puzzles, or if you're more casual. And then the game is actually changed a little bit. Like the path through the game and how difficult the puzzles will be, or if you have more action sequences. Beautifully told story, great graphics for the time, and very well playable still today. So that is a definite recommendation, and it's available on GOG, for example.
Good old games doing the Lord's work.
Yeah.
And Overlord.
Besides,
Overload.
Yes.
It looks absolutely amazing. I've seen some gameplay footage for it, and it's definitely in the spirit of what Descent was. It's just better. But Descent had some issues, but it looks fantastic. I can't wait to give that a go.
and you still have to work really hard to finding all the secrets. That's what made these old games such fun.
Yeah,
But otherwise, I mean, you said 3 games, but just let me name Flashback, Dune, Another World, Turrican, Cannon Fodder, for example, Lemmings, of course, Alien Breed. There's so many great games from back then that you can still well play today.
which is awesome. You mentioned Another World, so if you do get that one, be sure to pick up the Sega CD version of Another World that actually has a separate chapter at the end. So initially in Another World, you play as a human character, and it's minor spoiler, but something happens to your human character, and that's the end of the game. While in the Sega CD version, it actually continues as the main alien, and you finish the campaign with that. So it is like
You play as Mike Aruba?
Yep, you do. And it's the original creator didn't quite like the story, but he actually agreed with them at the end that it was a nice thing to do because of the way it ended. And it still has, I think, the most iconic opening scene of any game. I mean, you go down a lift, you go into a large Hadron Collider, and lightning strikes, and it rushes down with the atoms being smashed, and it zaps you into the other world. Well, this spectacular, moody music plays in the background. Fantastic game. Definitely, if I were to name 4, I would say that would be my 4th one. But things that I would recommend people listening right now to play, it's generally things that I think people haven't touched yet. So the first thing that I would recommend everyone to try and get is a game called Inner Worlds. It was released in 1996 by Sleepless Software Incorporated. And what's nice about this game is it's proper abandonware. As in, the developer sent out a letter and said they were contacted and asked, can we distribute your game? And the developer sent out a reply letter saying, yes, you may distribute my game. It's been abandoned. We're not making any money from it anymore, so everyone can get this game for free. And what's so nice about it, and why I would recommend it, is it's basically Jill of the Jungle, which is a spectacular platformer. It's one of the better ones made by Apogee, I think it was. But you turn into a werewolf in the game, and you use that to solve puzzles. So it's a feral werewolf that you turn into, and you can snarl, bite, and bark. And in some parts of the game, you need to be in the werewolf form to complete the puzzles. Very, very nice game. And if anyone has the time, and it's free, it works in DOSBox, so you don't have to worry about configuring and getting it to work. Check out Inner Worlds. Then what I would suggest everyone do is try and find a PlayStation 1 emulator or a PlayStation 1 game called Klonoa.
I know Klonoa.
You know Klonoa. It's about that cat character with ears that's long that almost act like arms and things, an extension of it.
And and almost like wings to a degree.
Yeah, precisely. And a 3D platformer, and these days if you mention 3D platformers on PlayStation 1, everyone's Crash Bandicoot or Spyro. But this was another one that was like on that level of awesomeness. So I would definitely recommend everyone give that a go. It has quite a few sequels, huge following in Japan. They love them. Even some fursuits made of Klonoa in Japan. And if you want to hunt down some photos of those, they're quite nice. And the final thing is something I think everyone's played, and that's Doom. But I want you to hunt down 2 mods for the game. The first one is called Guncaster. And I'm not going to swear on the podcast, but you play as this bad that dragon with a power trip and a power fantasy, and you've got these huge guns. Now, Doom had some really awesome, powerful guns. You got a good feel when you like fire them and stuff, but these take it to a whole nother level. All new maps, all new enemies. It's basically a game onto itself. It changes it in such a huge way. I'll definitely recommend that you guys track that down. And then the other add-on that I would like everyone to try is Rise of the Wool Ball, which is
Rise of the what now?
Wool Ball. So wool like in sheep and ball like in ball.
Okay.
Okay, and you play as this hedgehog. No, actually, it's a porcupine. You play as a porcupine that fights fascist felines in the game. It has an awesome sense of humor. And what's nice is they turn the game into sort of bullet hell, projectile, dodge 'em game for all of the bosses and stuff. It has this cutesy art style that is something on itself, and you won't believe that you're playing Doom if you actually play that. You'll feel like you're playing an indie game that came out in 2018.
Interesting.
So that's
Well,
what
if you like bullet hell.
Yeah.
If you like bullet hell games, try Ikaruga.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, Ikaruga is tough.
Sure. But I mean, what about like what's the word? And Turok, for instance. And do you guys? I'm not sure. Does anybody remember a game called Vivisector?
I can remember
It
the
sounds
title.
familiar.
If I look at the screenshot, I'll probably remember it.
Yeah, Vivisector was sort of based off of the island of Dr. Moreau, in that you have these genetically modified animals that you've got to fight. You start off by fighting like lions and things like that, and eventually they're all just sort of like standing on their own on their paws and everything like that. It was very, very scary. I know that the main character, the lion, was one of the reasons why I bought it. Was on the cover art of the CD itself, and it was one of the reasons why I bought it. And I just sat there going like, "Oh, cool! I just realized that I'm killing every single one of these things." They're like genetically modified hyenas, lions, tigers, elephants, bears.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of games were like that where the furries are the baddies. I mean, there's one called Realms of Chaos by Apogee, and basically the same sort of effect. All of the furries are baddies. Wing Commander, another good example of the furries are the baddies. But they did it in such a way where I wouldn't say that it's actually, how can I say, insulting to the fandom in any way. It's done quite nice. So if you like games, I would recommend playing some of those.
Well, there are also positive examples like Draken, Order of the Flame, or I think it was the first Divinity game where you are a Dragon Knight and you can transform into a dragon.
I remember Drakon.
Drakon.
Friend of mine
They
played that.
never continued that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what's his name? That was sort of in the same time as, well, for me, like when I played it was around the same time as the first American McGee's Alice, which was also pretty good.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the American McGee's Alice was also a game in on itself.
Oh yeah.
I was so disappointed by that sequel.
The sequel wasn't great.
Flung from the original.
Yeah, but
well,
I mean,
since you mentioned Turok before, Turok was the first game I ever played with a 3D accelerator. And before I launched it, Buddy and I, we sat in front of the screen, started the game up, and our jaws dropped. You know, filtered textures, everything that looked like there were no pixels anymore was amazing. You know, fired the gun, there was a bit of puff of smoke coming out of the gun. So that was like a quantum leap for us back then.
And I can remember when I got my 3D accelerator, and I spent most of my time playing Tomb Raider on that, and even that was a huge leap. And it's amazing how over time we had these giant leaps, and I don't think we get them as much anymore. But basically, I don't know if you guys want to experience it, but from the Atari 2600, where literally everything was created out of little blocks, it wasn't quite even pixels yet, it was just shapes. Then you went to the NES, which things started to get shapes and pixels and everything like that, and they look good, but the colors weren't that great. And then giant jump to the 16-bit era and the Super Nintendo and the Genesis, where you got animations and full characters and sprites and that sort of stuff. And then I think the next one up from that was the 3D platform, or the 3D shooter, which was Wolfenstein and then Doom. which was the next big leap. And then you had the 3D accelerators and Quake. And I think the next one...
And Half-Life.
Yeah, Half-Life, which was the Quake 1 engine. And a lot of people don't realize that. But they took it and then they added events and storyline, which was the first time that you can do a narrated story in a FPS was Half-Life. And I think that was a giant leap. But nowadays we don't see as big leaps other than the VR. I think VR is the next big one. And KiDra has a lot of experience in the VR department.
Yeah, it definitely is. And the big problem about VR is cannot show people on a 2D screen what VR is like. They have to experience it, and they have to experience it not just half an hour. They have to experience it over a few days, because you can use VR in different ways. Like when you put the headset on, obviously you have the ability to look around in 360 degree, you have a head tracked, and you have depth perception. But that's not what makes VR so amazing. What makes it amazing is to be able to get out of your chair and have room scale VR, like an area of 3 times 3 meters, and walk around inside that with tracked controllers, walk around objects, and immerse in the game in that way. And I like to compare that to, when the computer mouse was invented. When it first hit the market, people had to figure out how to use this new input device, what to do with it, how to utilize it to its best of abilities and possibilities. And it's the same with VR. I mean, one thing is locomotion, these games. Like, how do you traverse larger distances in a VR game without getting motion sick? I mean, to prevent motion sickness, you need 90 frames per second and a top-notch tracking experience. But if you want to go from one point in a VR game to another, the first thing they did is teleport, because that doesn't cause motion sickness. Shooters like Pavlov VR and Onward, for example, they use you slide. And the first time I used that, I mean, I own a HTC Vive, it feels like you're sliding over ice, but you get used to it. It's really not that bad with motion sickness. You need to give it some time and you get totally used to it. And for example, I play Elite Dangerous, and there you can go down onto a planet and drive around over the surface with a surface recon vehicle, like a buggy. But of course, this is all bumpy. Your view tilts up and down, left and right. And when I let a friend play this, he got nauseous for 2 hours. But it doesn't do anything to me anymore. It's really something you can get used to. And this is not going away. This is the next great big thing that we still are figuring out how to best use it. And I mean, currently, resolution, field of view, and everything is getting increased. The headsets get lighter, possibly more affordable. And even when you have a PlayStation VR, I never tried that, but friends told me that while PlayStation VR is nice, good, and a good entry point into VR, it's not on the level of an Oculus Rift or an HTC Vive, for example. But yeah, that's early adopters for you. It's very expensive, but I would do it again any second. It's so awesome. Oh, fun fact there.
Yeah.
There's a website called vrhealth.institute, and they measure your calorie consumption while playing VR games, because you're moving, you're standing, and some of these games like Beat Saber is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Beat Saber is awesome.
Yeah, for the listeners who don't know it, you have 2 lightsabers, one in red, one in blue, and there are blocks floating towards you in blue and red, and they have arrows on them, and this is the direction you have to cut them. So, and the blocks are actually beats of the music. So you start doing a choreography with lightsabers that matches the music, and this is actually because this website compares the calorie consumption to classic sports, and this is as intense as playing solo tennis.
Wow.
And
that's good to know.
Yeah, I mean, you know the old stereotype of video gamers, like they don't move out, they get fat or whatever. If everybody would be playing VR games, we would be ripped. And then some weight vests and everything, you're totally working out there. You can use it for workout.
I mean, it's interesting. Like, speaking about that, like I was watching, he's an ex League of Legends player. He used to play for TSM. Who's been doing, that VR game quite often, and let's just say that his weight loss regime is definitely sort of increased, especially with the game that you just mentioned.
Mm.
It's pretty interesting. Like, I mean, you're literally as Beat Saber, yeah. The amount of movement that Beat Saber makes you do is absolutely insane. And it's not like that old what's the word, that old meme that used to come up when people had like the Wii, where you're supposed to be playing tennis like an actual tennis player. And it got to such a point that even our sports scientists, because I did sports science as well, were actually recommending the Wii to help with particular motions, particular shoulder problems, so on and so forth, because the motions themselves are naturally supposed to do that. But it definitely, it's gotten so much better since then.
Yeah, I can remember when I got my Wii the first time round. It was a Japanese import. Luckily, the company I worked for at the time did a lot of imports, and I managed to track one down through them. And basically, the first week I had tennis elbow, like proper diagnosed tennis elbow for playing Wii tennis. And then, of course,
I'm sorry that I'm laughing, but that's a little bit funny.
It is. And after that, I realized, okay, I could sit on the couch and just like move. But I guess in VR, it's not like that. You physically have to move your body to do things.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I would love to get a VR setup at home. I'm just waiting for the price to come down, or a cheap way to do it. I can already see myself duct taping a tablet to my head or something.
Really the most important part of a VR system, I mean, I don't mind the screen door effect. Like you have this, in the beginning, you have this like fly net effect in front of your eyes because you can see the space between the pixels, but you very soon don't notice that anymore. But to me, it was apparent that the precision of the tracking is what makes or breaks VR. I mean, if I hold the Vive controllers in VR and move them together, and as soon as they touch in real life, they touch as 3D models. It's so precise and it's amazing. And if you want a really intense workout, but that I think you have to be careful with is the Thrill of the Fight, which is a boxing simulator. So you're basically doing shadow boxing, and this is actually rated by this one website I mentioned as intense as doing sprints. And I can confirm that when I did it for 10 minutes, I was like, so, geez, I'm totally exhausted already.
Yeah,
but you have to be careful not straining your shoulder or even hitting a wall.
I'm really excited for that, especially for furries. I can already envision some amazing furry games that they can do. Imagine a wolf simulator in VR.
Yeah, I mean, but in general, one of the big benefits of video games in general is that it practices hand-eye coordination, same in VR. But if you don't mind, I want to lead over to talking a little bit about the general positive effects of video games.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Like, I experienced that video games, especially RTS games or multiplayer games, while they are a social experience, that's great. You make new friends, you interact with people. But video games also put you in situations where you are faced with very quick decisions that you need to make.
Yes.
Like the situation changes and you need to adapt and you need to do it constantly. It's a skill that's being built there. Or really, there are games that I would call valuable, like Orwell or Papers, Please. For example, Papers, Please.
Papers, Please.
Yeah. It's a game where you are a border control officer to some dictatorship country.
Glory to our Stotska.
Yes, exactly. And what I love about this game is it shows you that sometimes you only have a choice between poor decisions and worse decisions. And there is no good decision, no definite good decision, because the game gives you a set of rules every day that determine if the papers of a person that wants to immigrate into your country is valid. And it's you get a set amount of money per person that you process. So you have to work fast. The first 2 mistakes are free. The third mistake costs you money. And the people will tell you stories like, my wife is next in line, but we are fleeing from that country. Please let her through. She doesn't have any valid papers. So if you let her through, it could happen that the newspaper you get at the end of the day talks about a woman who committed a terrorist attack, killing 10 people. And also at the end of the day, you get your bill. Basically, you have a wife, a kid, and your aunt or uncle is living with you. So, and if you don't have enough money to pay for heating, food, and everything, you need to decide, okay, what can we afford today? if you leave out heating, people get ill, then you need to pay for medicine. But if you can't afford medicine for every member of your small family there, who doesn't get medicine and will eventually die? So, or Orville. Orville puts you in the shoes of a surveillance system operator, and you work in a pair. You have a supervisor who only will see what you feed into the system as information. And when a person is suspicious, you get more and more features unlocked, like listening into phone calls, chats, or whatever. And the bits of information that you can drop into the Orville system, creating the context and information, are highlighted. And you have to decide, okay, they now said in a chat, oh, we totally bombed that place, but 2 sentences later say, yeah, of course, it was just a joke. But you can drag it in there, and you can create an entire new context and actually make an innocent person appear guilty.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really valuable what interactive games can teach you if they're properly executed, besides their awesome storytelling and experience. Yeah.
Yes.
One of the most interesting things like that is, I mean, now recently, well, I say recently, but about two odd years ago, I started playing Depression Quest. And granted, yes, it's text based and everything like that, but weirdly enough, the choices that you made seemed so far fetched, actually, that suddenly you start realizing that some of your choices disappear, for instance. And it's something like that sort of like really got to me, because I knew that like the first I've played it through twice now. And the first time round, I knew that I was going through like a very heavy dip. And it like the choices that were being made were part and parcel of who and how I was at the time. And I played it about pretty much a year later when I was in a better headspace. And it immediately did all of the right things. It was the entirety of like what kind of choices were there. But they're really, really banal choices. They're not choices that you'd expect would show particular things. It was something that seemed to be relatively well thought out, or at least put into a perspective from somebody who felt exactly like that. And that was something that I really can appreciate in games. Games that sort of ensure that your choices actively matter.
Yeah.
And that needs to be done. There's no other way that you can sort of like get that kind of immersion. I mean, like a whole bunch of people talk about immersion and things like that, and I know that some people would say that, you know, something like Fallout is an extremely immersive game. I would tend to disagree with that, irrespective of like the kind of choices that you can make. It's not immersive enough. Like the choices seem to not matter.
Yeah.
And as soon as the game has you making choices that do matter, it's a very good game.
Definitely.
Let me just drop Undertale in here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
When I first played Undertale,
Definitely Undertale.
When I first played Undertale and I had to go pastoral, I accidentally killed her. And then I was like, oh no, I don't want it like that. I restart, and then Flowey was like, I know what you did.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a great moment in any video game, and that I think Undertale was the first game in quite a long time that actually made me crying at some parts of Undertale. And he did a fantastic job, and I think he's also a closet furry. A lot of the artists that he actually commissioned to do artwork for the games are furries. So
yeah,
it's just a fantastic experience. But
yeah, for me, Ivik, you actually turned me onto this game like way back when. You remember To the Moon?
Oh, of course, To the Moon. Oh, goodness me, no, not To the Moon.
Pulled my eyes out of that game.
I would put it on my wish list.
Yes, yes.
It's like a 16-bit game with like it's very more sort of storytelling / walking simulator than game, but still it's.
No, I'll say it's a game.
It has an interesting story to it.
It has puzzles and things you have to do, so you have to collect things. And it's a game. It's not like the Dear Esther sort of level walking simulator.
Oh, but Dear Esther was still good. Dear Esther had me crying.
But Dear Esther, you can watch a Let's Play and get the same experience as actually playing it. That's why I don't like to do that. But for me, video games is my form of escape. It's where I can get into my headspace. And as a furry, nothing gets close to that as Second Life does. And I know a lot of people don't consider Second Life to be a game, but it is, because you can go to servers that's dedicated to gaming and to doing everything from first-person shooting to portals to you name it. But nothing allows me to be my persona as close as what Second Life does. And what's nice about it is you can be, thanks to mod, you can be everything from feral, you can be a quad, you can be a centaur, you can be anything you want in that game. And I just like going into it. If I've had an absolutely terrible day at work, put on Second Life, put on some nice ambient music, and just roam around as a dog. And just literally as a feral dog, go around, have people talk to you, pet you if you're into that sort of thing, and just explore. There's absolutely nothing better to get me away from reality than what that game has done. And what's interesting is they had people that suffered from anxiety, that suffered from social stress, go on to there, and the people actually get stressed in the beginning because it's so immersive that they're still stressed, but it'll allow them to overcome their fears and their inhibitions. So if you're scared of heights, there was a great study done with people doing height training in Second Life, and it actually allowed them to get over that phobia just by playing that game.
Sorry, the pun not intended, I'm assuming.
Oh, I don't even know.
Getting over your fear of heights.
Getting over your fear of heights. A literal getting over the fear, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's if there's immersion, that's the sort of thing that gets me going. But another good one that had me crying was Akami. That game was just absolutely a masterpiece.
But it's, you know what, the thing that I'd love to say is that the music makes the game.
Oh yeah,
it's the same thing. I mean, like if you played, now my Steam folder here. Night in the Woods is one as well.
Fantastic.
Songs like Die Anywhere Else, for instance, popping up every now and again. That also had me like bawling my eyes out after I heard like renditions of the song, for instance. But what was it? It's a game that nobody really. I think a lot of people passed over it for some reason, or a lot of people have played it before. But it's my Steam is updating currently. It's taking its time. Yes. An Elysian Tale. Dust and Elysian Tale.
He did such a spectacular job, and to think that one person did that game. For those of you that haven't played it, it's a Metrovania-like platformer. And what I loved about this developer is when this game came out on computer, he said, I'm going to spend the same amount of effort in porting the game over from Xbox to computer as what I did when I created the game. So he added things in there like a colorblind mode. So if you can't see colors, there's actually a colorblind mode that differentiates the colors and the power-ups so you can still play the game.
Yeah.
He improved the voice acting. He added so much to that game. And all because of a competition that he won with the Xbox development kit to become an indie developer. And he just set off to create this absolute masterpiece. It's a spectacular game.
Yeah, but the thing, what really like kind of irks me a little bit about this is the fact that it was actually meant to be an animated movie.
In what sense?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, there was, and the fact of the matter is that it started out as the storyline for a movie that he wanted to create, and he never got funding for that, so he decided to turn it into a game. And he actually said, I think at one point, that it was actually a better idea to do that because you're giving people that choice rather than having somebody read through your movie or like watch through your movie, that he would be able to, have you make the choices with him.
I once saw this meme. This image of an iceberg, and people usually say the portion over the water, the tip of the iceberg, is the movie, and everything below the surface is the book. Well, the entire iceberg is the video game.
Yeah,
basically.
That is.
But since you mentioned music, for example, in Amiga times, there was one composer that stood out to me. It's Chris Hülsbeck, who made a soundtrack of Turrican, and some years ago, the German West Germany Public Broadcasting Orchestra actually performed his compositions.
Oh.
And I think that's amazing that video game soundtracks are now being played by really big orchestras and being appreciated by a wide audience. I mean, I think all the Final Fantasy soundtracks had that honor already.
Yeah, and Zelda also was played in Japan by one of the huge orchestras, and it was a big commemorative thing. And I would recommend everyone just to have a listen through that.
No,
But one soundtrack that always gets to me is the one from Ori and the Blind Forest.
Oh yes, Ori and the Blind Forest does. Oh, don't make me cry. Come now.
There's a lot of really, really good music, especially on the old stuff. So I don't know if anyone here listens to chiptunes. If you don't, then
Yep.
it's great for furries. It's all more or less happy tunes, and it's basically when you take old hardware and have it play music, either new compositions or covers on old hardware. So there's a lot there from the Amiga period, the Commodore 64 period, lots done with the Yamaha YM628, I think it was, which is the chip found on the Sound Blaster. Lots of stuff with Gameboys, and it's just an art on itself. It's its own amazing thing. And I'm just glad that we're at the stage now where music is an art form for games, and it can be seen as its own thing. For instance, in my car, I've actually got my Unreal Tournament 2004 soundtrack sitting there, and I would listen to that as a CD because it was just that good.
Well, I mean, the limitations back in the days, it really made the developers push creativity in every aspect, be it sound, be it graphics, and they achieved some really amazing things.
Yeah, and I think limitation is what sparks creativity. It's working in a limited area that forces a person to be creative. I'm not going to say that we lost that spark. It's still definitely there, but we don't see it as often as what we used to.
Halcyon does mention though that there's a couple of amazing soundtracks. The Endless Game soundtrack is brilliant, as well as obviously the Souls games. They also have very brilliant accompaniment.
Well, if you mentioned the Souls game, that was very orchestral. Final Fantasy has some of the best soundtracks. And the Final Fantasy VIII piano soundtrack, which they basically took all of the Final Fantasy VIII things and replayed it on the piano. That was amazing. 10 had a fantastic soundtrack, and I'm a huge synth metal fan. And basically, 10th soundtrack was symphonic metal through and through.
Nice.
No, there's a lot of games with this, indie games almost with amazing soundtracks as well. Stuff like Guacamelee had an awesome soundtrack. The sort of transitioning between Dark World and Light World, the sort of slightly more down tempo, muted guitar in the background versus it's like almost techno flamenco when you're in the Light World kind of thing, which was amazing.
Techno flamenco, I like that.
Speaking of which, two games that you can still get remixes and stuff to this day. Portal 1 and 2 soundtracks are absolutely phenomenal.
Especially amazing ambient music.
Yeah, fantastic. And I love the sound effects and the stuff that they incorporated into the music. But also Undertale, we mentioned Undertale just now. This was basically his life work in terms of music. That he poured his life and soul into that game, and you can hear it. All of the tracks fit so well with the game that if you hear the track, you can see the fight that you did in the game, or the plot point, or the storyline. It's absolutely
the area that you're in. Techno flamingo. Apparently, says Halcyon.
Flamenco.
No, he says flamingo.
Yeah,
I would imagine. What would a techno flamenco look? Flamingo. I'm assuming that it's got glasses on.
I'm fairly sure that's someone's persona. If we go into For Affinity, type it in, that's someone's persona.
We'll find it. If not, I'm going to make one. But that's stripes down the legs,
isn't it?
It needs mechanical retractable legs for the legs. It needs to can be retracted.
You know what just comes to my mind? I mean, I'm currently having Vietnam flashbacks from my history of gaming. When I was 16 years old, I was with my family in Spain. We were on a vacation on a camping site, trailer. And at the bar, they had 2 arcade machines, and one of them had a game called Far East of Eden Kabuki Clash, which was a beat 'em up game. And that's what I used to play. I mean, I didn't hang out at the beach. I played that game, had to get money changed all the time to be able to play it, and the Spanish kids would be standing around me watching me because I got so far in the game that I nearly beat it. Like, in the end, last boss, we both had like 1 pixel of health, and the next punch would decide who wins. But I lost, and I had no quarters anymore, and had to shrug my shoulders and tell the kids, sorry, that's all. And they started beating up the arcade cabinet.
Oh, no.
They
Wow.
were so passionate.
Passion in games.
And I'm now waiting for this game to be released on Switch as part of the Arcade Archive Neo Geo series, because it's still great and playable.
Yeah, I really missed arcades because I used to have Mortal Kombat on my PC, which was like arcade port, but it was arcade perfect, so it was damn near to what the arcades were. And so I used to play this to end, and I could actually finish it with Raiden on 1 coin, and I can remember going to the arcades and getting, wow, you can do it, but I've played for hundreds of hours at home for free. I miss arcades. I really...
Yeah.
I wish we had what Japan has. I wish we had like VR arcades, like what you get in Japan, where you can go and...
Or arcade culture, at any rate.
Just any sort of
definitely.
arcade cultures. Like,
So,
Japan, you've got these huge tower buildings just full of arcades, and what's nice is the bottom ones have all of the new ones, and as you go higher up, it's the older machines until they get to like the 80 stage.
That's so
I
cool.
would so wish for that. You know, an arcade, and nice colors with an area to hang around where you can get nice beverage, an attached comic and manga store, whatever. So kids also have a place to hang out and live their culture. I mean, video games are culture.
Yeah, and that's why I'm really glad we grew up in that time. Today, kids hang out on the cell phone.
Yeah. You can ask Scratch the amount of times that, like, I would actually, when I was a lot younger, I think around about 13, 14, I used to, like, if ever we were in Menlyn, not Menlyn, what are we calling it now? What's the mall there nearby you, Scratch?
Tiger Valley.
Tiger Valley, yeah. And this was before Tiger Valley was actually revamped. Like, this was when do you remember? Yeah. They had the arcade there. They had the golf. They had a massive putt-putt course in the food court. Like, huge putt-putt court. But, like, I would just solely just walk around, and I would walk around in the arcades, and you'd feel safe, firstly, because, like, there's a whole bunch of kids around you, and you don't have to, like, deal with malls. You don't have to deal with people. You don't have to deal with with that kind of, you know, sort of anxiety that would come from being around people for more than, say, 2 or 3 hours, because you would find yourself behind a particular screen and you would play that. And that's it was that kind of thing that I really, really sort of enjoyed, is that, like, you know, being able to be somewhere, if you're doing very well in a particular game, people would, like, walk behind you and actually watch and see how you're doing.
Yeah, and you had arcade etiquette as well.
Yeah.
If someone behind you put a coin next to your coins on the arcade machine, that's the guy that plays next.
Yeah. Or it's a challenge.
Yeah. Or you also play 2-player and take you on. And in many ways, isn't the furry fandom similar to that? Furries are, when we're out in public, when we're out in malls, I've been to several fur meets in malls, and it's not the same. You can't be a furry in the mall. You can't act the same way. But if we go out and we go to a braai or a meet or the local furry con, which you guys did absolutely amazing job, by the way, you can then be a furry, be yourself, not wandering. All that anxiety just melts away and disappear, and you have the most amazing time.
Yeah, and that's a great thing of the fandom in general. How laid back people are. I mean, furries are known for drama, but I also know them for being so open and welcoming, and it's not as limiting.
No, of course. And I mean, we've run about 15 minutes over time already.
Oh God. Sorry.
Yeah, it's not even an issue. We've run over time before, and it's again we run over time because the conversation is actually really interesting. One of the things that I know that I'm going to probably end this here though. One of the things that I do want to say is thank you very much for being on here. Secondly, KiDra, do you have any social media that you'd like to sort of plug at all?
Only my Safari page, KiDra.safari.com.
Okay, and then obviously for you, Jess, it's a complete sort of smorgasbord of different kinds of information and things like that. Obviously.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. If you want to contact me as a furry, do it via Twitter. FASMAN on Twitter, and you can contact me there, and I'll share whichever social media you're on, because probably I'm on the same social media page as you. But if you like retro gaming and repairing and that sort of stuff, you can join me on my YouTube, which is HPZeta. So it's HPZETA. It's on YouTube. If you do a search on YouTube, it's the first channel that pops up. It's a small channel, 954 subs. I'm really trying to struggle to get over the 1,000 mark, but we do have a lot of fun, and there's live streams, and I like interacting on there as well.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, I've actually been watching. You did a challenge, 3 days with 2002 technology.
Yeah, and you laugh. It was actually quite a lot of fun. It taught me a lot. For starters, first thing I'm going to do with the next one is make sure that the hardware I chose to work on is working, so I don't spend the first day fixing it. But that was part of the fun. The second thing is just how addictive we are to social media, and you know me, Ivik. I'm on just about every platform that exists out there. And literally, even though my persona is a dog, I'm trained as a dog. If I hear that little bell on my phone go, I need to check what post was there and on what platform, and I need to reply. It's amazing how addicted I am as a person to social media, and we are as a society on social media. Not that it's a negative thing. I don't think it's a negative. It's just interesting to detect and see how much it actually is.
Yeah, it's something to be aware of for sure.
Yeah, it's something to be aware of. The way I see it, as long as it's not destructive to your private life or your social life, then I don't see anything wrong with social media. And for me, because it's not destructive, it's actually good. It's most of my social life being a furry is online. It's the only place I can be myself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you guys again for being here. We really did enjoy this chat. It's a little bit of a trip down nostalgia road. One of the things that, I mean, again, like we'd love to have you. We can talk about this again, because I can say again. Haha. Obviously. But yeah, so we really do appreciate having you, and we'd love to have you on again.
No problem. If you ever have a podcast and you need an expert in VR or other games, you know who to contact, and we don't mind being part of other podcasts in the future. And it's always so nice chatting with like-minded furs and people.
Yeah,
definitely.
All right.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. And thank you guys all for joining in. Ivik, you have music after this, correct?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So we shall see you guys again next week.
Ivik, if you have music after this, try to play some game music.
Yeah, see if there are any some chip tunes or game soundtracks.
I'll play some game music. Don't worry.
There's this retro gaming remix channel that's not. How can I say? Everything's open source. There's no copyright, so you can stream those. I'll post you.
OC Remix, right?
Yeah, RC Remix, fantastic site.
OC Remix.
There we go. OC Remix. Yeah. So go play some OC Remix.
Cool. I'll definitely get that up. I will download and do this.
All right. See you guys. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
See you.
Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.